Today's subscriber Saturday or Sunday, whichever day you're seeing this or whenever the editing finishes, comes from Steve DeMatter. I hope you said your name right. He had given me a suggestion in the past and said another idea kind of similar is players not so highly touted that made it. DeGrom, McNeil, Murphy, Alfonso. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do every player, only some. I mean, this could be something that is a multiple part series. This is something that could be multiple videos. We could do a part 2, part 3, whatever. So let me know if this is something you want to see in the future, and if you like this kind of video, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below, what are some players that you remember that came up through the Mets farm system and the organization where you didn't really hear about them too much, didn't think too highly of them, then when they actually played for the Mets, they played well. And also comment down below what other suggestions you have for subscriber Saturday or Sunday videos. I have plenty others coming because you guys have left a lot of good suggestions, so definitely be on the lookout to that. And then while we're talking about subscribing, make sure to subscribe, this way you don't miss any videos. Makes my day, makes everything worth it. So the guy that we will start off with is Edgardo Alfonso. And what I like about Alfonso is that here's a guy who's an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, usually talk about some of these guys that are on that were drafted in the 12th round, 13th round. And yes, more rounds have been added as time has gone on. But Alfonso came in undrafted. So anytime you're undrafted, you don't have a lot of expectations. But Alfonso is a guy that turned out to be a really good Met. One of the better Mets of all time. Not saying the best, but better, you know, compared to a lot of other Mets. Alfonso's up there because here's a guy that in the 90s and the early 2000s was very important to the Mets team. One of the reasons why they actually were successful in 1999 and 2000, because years where the Mets were actually in the playoffs are very few and far between, and having somebody like Alfonso made a huge difference. It was nice to see that the Mets actually had somebody who was undrafted do well compared to all the first round picks we've talked about and other big time prospects that just have not worked out for this organization. The next guy I want to talk about is Bud Harrelson, and the reason why Bud Harrelson is a very interesting guy to put on this list, in the minor leagues he was 150 pounds. He was error prone, didn't have much on the bat, especially with batting average, but Bud Harrelson turned out to be a pretty significant player for the Mets in the 1969 Miracle Mets World Series team, and when they made the World Series in 1973. His great defense, being a guy that could be an all-star. Harrelson got MVP votes. Harrelson was a Gold Glove shortstop. He was a clutch hitter, even though he didn't give you any power, just putting the ball in play and doing the little things that ended up being very important on the 69 team because they had the pitching. If you could put good defense behind good pitching, it makes a big difference. So Bud Harrelson, I mean, when you looked at his size, nobody really thought he was going to turn out to be much, but he turned out to be a pretty solid Met. Up next is my favorite current New York Met, Jeff McNeil. I had not really heard too much about Jeff McNeil until the year that he came up when the minor leagues, this dude was raking. I mean, he had over 400 average or whatever it was. He was hitting really, really well on every level that the Mets put him in. So they're like, you know what? We might as well call him up. I mean, what else do we got to lose? And when McNeil came up right away, you saw this guy could freaking hit the ball. Ever since then, every year over 300 batting average, and I am just super excited to see how Jeff McNeil's career goes. I really hope that he stays healthy and productive, that they re-sign him, all that stuff. Just keep McNeil as a Met for a long time so he can give us year after year above 300 average. Hustle, gives you some power, versatility with playing the multiple positions. Just put the ball in play. There's just so many reasons to like Jeff McNeil. Good guy, really gets along with the rest of the team. So I'm just very excited, and I'm glad that a guy who was a 12th round pick has been so successful in the Mets, has already been an all-star at such a young stage in his career. The next player, I mean, Jeff McNeil, I call him the young Murphy because that's who I want to talk about next, Daniel Murphy. He was selected in the 13th round, and as time went on, Murphy got better because, you know, Murphy was always a bit of a strange guy with the way he played the field, with the way he ran the bases, and just how sneaky Murphy is. Murphy would always look around the field, trying to find the holes in the defense, and then just shoot it to the opposite field. And I feel like Jeff McNeil is like that too. He's sneaky. He likes to go the other way, contact players, play second, third, and left. When Murphy came up, he played some left field. He has played some third base. So him and McNeil play similar positions, both left-handed. But for Daniel Murphy to be a 13th round pick and then be so important for the 2015 Mets and have that amazing series against the Chicago Cubs and the big home runs he hit against the Dodgers as well, let's not forget that. That was just really nice to see that someone who was selected in the 13th round almost helped the Mets win a World Series. Speaking of 13th round picks, another guy who was a 13th round pick was Lane Dykstra, who turned out to be a very good Met, helped them with the 86 team, but because of his personality, ended up being traded way too soon and then went on to have a really good career with the Philadelphia Phillies. But still, anytime that a guy can help you win a World Series and could be a pretty big part of your team and was selected in the 13th round, they have to be on this list. Speaking of the 86 team, I think that at an honorable mention, somebody that kind of could be on the list is Mookie Wilson, because he was a second-round pick and still was pretty effective for the New York Mets. If you could get a player in the second round that could be pretty productive for a championship team, that's another very solid draft pick. The next guy I want to talk about is Jerry Koosman, because you remember Jerry Koosman in the 60s, when the Mets brought him on after he was in the Army, they were considering cutting him. They weren't going to let him stay with the organization, but they were like, you know what, at least let him make his first paycheck. And what they saw in spring training and what they saw in the International League, Jerry Koosman pitched so well, like, we have to get this guy on the roster. And it's probably one of the most underrated Mets and maybe players ever, because of how good he was in the shadows of Tom Seaver, helping the Mets win in '69 and being part of the team that went to the World Series in 1973. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Jerry Koosman at a game at Shea Stadium where he was signing autographs and meeting fans, and I got this autographed baseball from Jerry Koosman. There it is right there. And he was a really nice man. He was very nice to me and my father. I'm glad I got to meet him, and obviously I didn't see him pitch in '69. My dad did, but he definitely deserves to be on this list because the guy was going to be cut from the team and ended up being very important to their success in the late 60s and early 70s. Speaking of the '69 Mets, another person I believe deserves to be on this list is Cleon Jones, because when Cleon Jones came up, he had 2 hits and 15 at-bats and was first in the Mets. Then Cleon Jones would get demoted. He would have a 150 average, a 149 average, but then eventually Cleon Jones just kept improving and of course ended up being a big part of the Mets 1969 World Series team. The next guy I want to talk about is the DeGrominator, Big Jake DeGrom, who has been such an amazing player, and I'm so glad is still on the Mets. DeGrom was selected in the 9th round. Players like Rafael Montero are supposed to be better than Jacob DeGrom. Obviously, that has not been the case, as DeGrom has been the best pitcher in baseball, has won 2 Cy Youngs in a full season. He probably wins it again in 2020, and I wouldn't be surprised if he won it in 2021. I mean, this is the best pitcher in baseball, and if you can get the best player at a certain position, especially starting pitching in the 9th round, and a guy who was so important in the 2015 team in the playoffs, especially against the Dodgers, I mean, what a great draft pick Jacob DeGrom has turned out to be, and I hope that once Jacob DeGrom's contract runs out, Mets can re-sign him again, because he is a guy I think will age so well with his ability to pitch, not rely on velocity. Games where Jake doesn't have his best velocity, he still is effective with the way he commands and uses his pitches. The next guy I feel really deserves to be on this list is Benny Agbayani, who was selected in the 30th round by the New York Mets. I mean, could you imagine being selected in the 30th round? That's really far back. That's a lot of players that got picked over him. And he ended up being a pretty important player for the Mets in '99 and 2000. Obviously, he had that huge walk-off home run for the Mets in the playoffs, and he would just have an average close to 300. Anytime a player is that productive and was selected in the 30th round and helped you in the playoffs, you have to put him on the list. And the last guy I decided to put on here, definitely not least, the reason why I put David Wright here is because he was the 38th pick. I know that coming up through the farm system, David Wright was supposed to be his big-time prospect coming, him and Jose Reyes, but when you think of how many players were selected over David Wright, I mean, going into the draft, you wouldn't have the expectation that David Wright was going to turn out to be so good. Had it not been for the injuries, I mean, David Wright could have still been playing and been very, very productive. One of the best third basemen in the league. A guy that wins a Gold Glove, obviously a great person, good hitter, for contact, for power. I mean, David Wright was just a whole package, the captain and everything like that. So for the 38th pick, he turned out to be really good for the Mets. In '06, obviously, 2015, he definitely gave them an emotional boost, had a home run in the World Series. Other than that, he wasn't the player that he normally is with that low average. We know David Wright's better than that. But those are the guys that I put on here. I feel like someone who eventually could probably be on this list is Pete Alonso, only because with Alonso, like we heard about him in the minor leagues, he has some power. Glove isn't that good. When Alonso came up in his rookie year, hit over 50 home runs, it was like, oh my gosh, look at Pete Alonso. So I want to see Alonso play a little more before I put him on this list. I don't want him to be a one-year wonder. That's another video that will be coming out on our subscriber Saturday that was suggested, one-year wonders. I hope Alonso isn't that guy. We'll see. Hopefully it is with the Mets. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, let me know guys that came up through the Mets farm system that weren't thought of that highly, that the Mets got undrafted or international or very late in the draft that ended up being productive player for the Mets. I tried to focus on the teams that had to do with some kind of championship run or championship itself. But until the next one, be safe, be smart, be healthy, and let's go Mets.